Shabbat Shalom. Baruchim Habaim, and again, Mazel Tov to the entire Henry family, and especially you, Leora. It's nice to see so many of you here, and I know multiple reasons bring you here. First and foremost, we have a large number of people that want to be together at B'nai Torah congregation on Shabbat morning. So this crowd is really reflective of what we've been growing towards ever since the end of COVID, but it's also here to celebrate with the Henrys, and I know some of you have come to hear our scholar in residence, which is going to prove to be worth your while. A word about Eitz Chaim Hi. I've always felt that it represents a type of pinnacle in the spiritual expression of Shabbat morning. We're still connecting ourselves to Torah, and we're singing together as a community, and the voices together are so beautiful. The particular rendition, which is done by Cantor Fishman and by our choir, stirs me deeply, deeply. It's so beautiful. They do it so very, very well. But in addition, this congregation has its own unique history with Eitz Chaim. It has to do with what we did together as a community during the days of COVID. We decided to write a Torah. We decided to write a Torah that would keep our community together. So how did we do that? Because we weren't allowed to be together. We set up a chuppah on this bima, and individuals made appointments to come and meet with the sofer and myself. And we all wore masks, and so there were a couple people on the bima. The sofer wrote the letters of the Torah, gave people an opportunity to write letters into the Torah. And it was all videotaped, and it was live streamed to anyone who wished to join in. And we did realize at that moment that it is partially our faith that's going to get us through those difficult days. And we're so deeply tied together by that Eitz Chaim. And every time that ark is opened, I see that particular Torah that is our Torah, a life-giving Torah. It's really beautiful, a wonderful experience. When I was asked what I wanted to do on the Shabbat, where I would be honored for my retirement, the first thing that I thought of is gather people together for good food and drink. You see, my family, I wanted them to come from all over, and I knew that if there would be good food, we'd get them all here. And that promise never fails here. But more than that, I also wanted to have a scholar in residence on that Shabbat morning. And those of you, and so many of you do, who know me, know that there's a scholar in residence of choice. There's a voice of leadership. There's a voice of sanity, a voice of deep meaning in this world. His strength and his power come not through his certainty, but through his willingness to express uncertainty. His capacity to, as a very powerful man, express his concerns and often his fears. And so Donniel Hartman, together with Yossi Klein Halevi, have a podcast that I believe is one of, if not the most popular Jewish podcasts in the world. It's called For Heaven's Sake. Donniel is the president of the Shalom Hartman Institute, a leading research and educational center that serves Israel and world Jewry. They work to enrich the moral and spiritual life of Israel and the Jewish people, to deepen the commitment to pluralism in Israel's Jewish and democratic character, and rebuild the covenant between Israel and the Jewish world. They have a community of outstanding scholars and educators, perhaps amongst the most outstanding in the world. The Institute develops innovative responses to the challenges of today. It cultivates a new generation of leaders and change agents, and it builds transformational educational projects that help inspire a better Judaism and, God willing, a better Israel for the 21st century. It's funny in life how things happen, sometimes on purpose, sometimes as a function of having worked hard and shown a commitment and a desire to achieve something, and sometimes we're just lucky, and that events unfold in this world. In our local federation, there was a man named Ron Rashevsky. I'd never met him, and frankly, to this day, I never met him. 21 years ago, he said to the Federation leadership, "There's a great program in Jerusalem for rabbis. This community has to send a rabbi." The executive director of the Federation called me up and said, "We'd like to send you to a rabbi's program at the Shalom Hartman Institute. Are you interested?" And I hesitated about 2-3 seconds and said, "Absolutely." Well, you couldn't just go to the program. You had to be accepted into the program. I received a call that Dr. Rabbi Donniel Hartman was going to be in Hollywood, Florida, giving a speech, and he wanted to meet with me before he gave the speech. So I get to that temple, and we met in the rabbi's office there, the two of us. It took me about 2 minutes to realize that Donniel was speaking the language, understood this tradition in a way and with the structure and with aspirations that were central to my Jewish life, and I wanted to learn there. And that experience at the Hartman Institute transformed my life. But more than that, it brought me a very, very good friend, a man who I truly can say I love. And I'm so proud to have been able to invite Donniel, and he has said yes over the years, to speak to all of you. So, Donniel Hartman.
It took me 2 seconds. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. David asked me to speak this Shabbat on the theme of morality in times of danger. I believe I speak for all of us. Israeli Jews, American Jews. Now? Any more changes? Now? It took me 2 seconds. I think I speak, and on behalf of all of us, on behalf of all of our feelings, whether as Israelis, where I live, or whether in the United States and also in Canada, and in fact, for many Jews around the world. We feel under greater danger than most of us have felt throughout our lives. In Israel, as you know, we are fighting for our lives against an enemy whose depravity and evil knows no bounds. We are fighting to try to hold on to our sanity and our hope, looking for somebody on the other side who's going to say, no, this is not our way. This is not what we do. This is not the future that we want for our children and for our people. This is not what we stand for, and we're waiting. Not merely our physical existence, but our right to be a free and sovereign country is in danger as we're attacked around the world by seemingly decent people. But somehow their decency doesn't apply to the state of Israel. People who already on October 8th were certain that killing us was an act of justice. And just recently we had to bar a member of the European Union, whatever they have, who says this: Hamas has every right to kill Jews. Your mere existence as an occupying, genocidal, apartheid, colonial state makes killing you a moral act. These are dangers that we've never felt, never experienced. But the war is not, and the assault and the dangers aren't just in Israel. You too are unsettled in ways that you couldn't predict. And as I travel around North America, I'm constantly talking to people who are still in a state of shock. What's happening? Most anti-Semitism is still verbal, but we know, not all of it, but we know very well that anti-Semitism that starts with words ends up leading to actions, and it leads to actions already now. And we're looking, and we don't feel as safe. And we wonder what type of future. But it's not just an assault on us. This dangerous time is experienced as Americans at large, as not just our safety is assaulted, truth is assaulted, decency is assaulted, compassion is assaulted, and even moral principles are assaulted. All in the name of some deal, all in the name of winning, all in the name of self-aggrandizement, and we're looking and saying, what world do we live in? Feels unstable, it feels dangerous. And when you feel assaulted, some of us get exhausted. Some of us get despaired. Some of us also feel that the only thing we can talk about right now is how do we get through the next day? How do we protect ourselves? And we connect to the Maslow hierarchy of needs and say the basic need for safety and security is what calls us. And until that is not addressed, everything else is a luxury. Self-fulfillment and actualization through moral principles, that's wonderful. That's our higher self. We are now in the gutters, fighting for our pure, simple right to live, to be free, and to live in a sane universe. To know that facts actually matter, that you could talk to people, that disagreement is acceptable, and that decency counts. It's hard to live in a world where common decency is not that common. And so we shrink. In Israel, we shrink. In North America, we shrink. And morality becomes a theme for some utopian tomorrow. But as a community, we can't struggle, we can't work. We now have to simply be. Morality in times of danger is an unnatural conversation. as a mother told me, and I might have shared this with you, but I remember the moment and I remember shaking when she told me. She said to me, Donniel, I hear you about morality. And I want to talk to my son when he comes back from Gaza about what he's experiencing and what we ought to be doing. But she says, I'm frightened. I'm frightened if I talk to my soldier about his moral obligations. What will happen if he goes back to Gaza and hesitates? Will I be causing my son's death? Somehow morality and security feel to be mutually exclusive or somehow in conflict with each other, and I have to deal with the life of my child, I have to deal with the life of my people, I have to fight anti-Semitism. Not now. But as Jews, we have a particular problem. Judaism is a really complicated religion. It's really hard to describe what we are. A religion with 613 commandments keeps you busy. But interestingly enough, our tradition adopted over and again an elevator pitch. What's the essence of Judaism? What does it mean to be a Jew? Rabbi Steinhardt quoted Hillel. Hillel says, what's hateful unto you, do not do unto others. But there's another line that he says. That's the whole Torah. That's it. There is no Judaism without a commitment to the ethical. Wrong religion. Over and again, the prophets look at the Jewish people who are praying away and sacrificing away, and they say, you are making me nauseous. God says, who asked this of you? So of course there's a lot of commandments. But if there isn't a core of decency and moral commitment, you're not a Jew. This is not Judaism. And in Genesis 18, God turns to Abraham and says to him, I have selected you. Jewish chosenness is founded on the principle that you are going to teach your children that to walk in the way of God is to do what is just and right, not to keep Shabbos, not to eat kosher. Those are nice things. But why am I picking you? What's the essence? What's my elevator pitch? What does it mean to be a Jew? It's to walk in the way of God by doing what is just and right. I don't know if you know this, but under Jewish law, we define, it's a little aspirational, but we define that to be a Jew is to have compassion upon all. And in Jewish communities, Maimonides puts it into law that if you meet somebody who has no compassion and is cold-hearted, their Jewishness is suspect. Could you imagine? Could you imagine? That's us. So we're stuck. If you want to be a Jew at this moment, we can't but talk about morality. But how? How do we talk about morality? Can we psychologically overturn the Maslow pyramid and hierarchy? Is it psychologically possible? Is it even right to do? But we have no choice. So that's why I'm speaking about this topic today. But I'm also speaking about this topic not just because David asked me, but in honor of David. Over 20 years ago, we started to talk. And we became, friends is a little shallow. We became brothers. Our souls became interconnected. And for 21 years, we're talking. Over the years, we started to spend more and more time talking about our medical conditions, how we're feeling, We talk about our spouses. We spend a lot of time talking about our children. But every single time David and I talk, he talks about his concerns for the moral fiber of the Jewish people. What do we stand for here in North America? What do we stand for here in Israel? What does America stand for? To be a rabbi who does that is dangerous. Rabbis who do that do not hold on to their positions for 30 years. Jews want you to speak about their fears. They want to speak about loyalty. Loyalty to Jews, loyalty to Israel. Given our history, very often our congregants see and experience the Maslow pyramid and say, Rabbi, talk to me about anti-Semitism. So that we Jews could together, as we converge, could together condemn it over and over again. That's not David. And our love and journey together has been a love asking, how do we claim the essence of our tradition and bring it to life and fight for it? So it's in your honor, for the type of rabbi you are, that it is my honor to talk about morality in times of danger. There is nothing that defines your rabbinate besides your sweetness and kindness and intelligence and gentleness, but soon it's going to sound like a eulogy. It's that moral spirit which, besides our love for each other, is really the foundation of our bond. Morality in times of danger. There are 2 presuppositions and 3 principles that I want to share. Now, I want to talk about morality, but I don't want to moralize. First of all, no one wants to hear anybody moralizing. There's nothing more nauseous than that. There's nothing more nauseous than somebody standing on a bima or a pedestal with moral certainty telling everybody what they're doing wrong. I don't want to go into the details of what we should do. Now, there are certain things that are self-evident, and therefore you shouldn't have to talk about them. It's just in case you didn't know, it's self-evident that Russia attacked Ukraine. And if I have to talk to you about that, there's nothing to talk about. It's self-evident that Hamas is evil and that the Jewish people have a right to defend themselves. And if I have to debate that, I have nothing to talk about. It's self-evident that transferring 2 million people from their homes is an abomination. And if I have to talk to you about that, there's nothing to talk about. But there are a lot of struggles and things that we do need to talk about. And good people, intelligent people, caring and decent people could share values and still have very different political solutions and practical directions for these problems. Should we go back to fight? Should we not? Hostage deal, yes. Too much, not. I don't want to get into the particular ethical dilemmas. I want to speak about how do we think and how do we bring moral discourse back into our lives in times when it is unnatural. But that's what we Jews do. And my hope and prayer is that as we talk about it, we think about it. And as we think about it, we create space in our heart to reconnect to who we are as Jews and to our role in the world. 2 presuppositions and 3 principles. The first presupposition of any moral conversation is that knowing the good is difficult. Doing it is much harder. And we will fail. This is what the Bible teaches us. The Bible teaches that human beings are evil from their youth, not from their birth. It's not original sin. But as we grow older, we are going to fail morally. And anybody who believes that they are somehow beyond that moral failure are going to embody moral failure. The beginning of a moral conversation is to know that you are often, or at least sometimes, flawed. And if you can't accept that, if you can't accept that of Jews, if you can't accept that of America, if you can't accept that of Israel, then all moral discussion is for naught. There's no place. As you walk through the world, self-anointed with moral righteousness, there is no possibility for moral conversation. And our tradition teaches us that human beings are always going to create a world filled with corruption. It's just part of our story. Presupposition number one: we all have work, and moral responsibility and challenges are not just the domain of the other, it's our responsibility too. Presupposition one. Presupposition two: so often people believe that morality and security are in opposition. Presupposition two of our tradition: to protect yourself is a moral responsibility. Now, this might seem self-evident, but it's actually unbelievably important. If all human life is sacred, so is mine. But more than that, it's when I believe that security and morality can be in opposition that I have a conflict and a fear of moral conversation, because I want to protect myself. But actually, in the Jewish tradition, the Maslow hierarchy of self-preservation and security and self-actualization are actually collapsed into each other. Because to protect yourself is actually moral actualization, is a moral responsibility. So when I go to war, I am frightened of people who say, I can't afford to be moral right now. Why can't you? Because I'm worried about Israel's survival. So why can't you? But it's when you know that you're going to war as an expression of justice, as an expression of liberal values, as an expression of human rights, then when you go to war and you kill, there is a possibility that morality will accompany you, not just in moments of self-defense, but when you encounter people and moments where it is not an issue of self-defense. The dichotomization of the two is a danger for the future of Israel and of Judaism. Presupposition number two: when I protect myself, when I protect my family, yes, when I kill out of self-defense, that is a liberal, moral principle and obligation. Two presuppositions. And now three principles of morality, which our tradition asks us to think about. The first starts with the first moral failure. The minute we leave the Garden of Eden, Cain looks at his brother, gets all jealous that God might love him better, and he kills him. But it's not just the killing that is his failure. God turns to him and says, "Where is your brother?" Where is he? And Cain says the statement, "Am I my brother's keeper?" And the answer that our tradition gives, both to Cain and over and again in Jewish law, whether it's in laws of tzedakah, whether it's in laws of compassion, whether it's in laws of decency, is simple. My friends, the foundation of morality begins with the understanding that you are your brothers and sisters' keeper. That's the foundation of moral decency. That immorality begins when you are indifferent. Immorality begins when you hold a remote control and click, or a mouse and click to another page, to another story, when you choose not to see. I don't want to see. You are your brothers and sisters' keeper. And indifference, whether it's from exhaustion, what are we doing here in America? You're flooding something, the swamp, or they're just exhausting you. And so I choose to be indifferent. I can't deal with it. I can't deal with that insanity. And maybe he's also good for Israel. So I don't want to deal with it. I'm going to turn the channel. Or I'm going to watch the channel that makes me feel better. And what I don't see, imagine what Ukrainians feel right now. Just imagine. Could you put yourself in their position? I met with a group of Israeli Jews and Israeli Palestinians in a program at the Hartman Institute. And there was a theme. Someone came up with a theme that they wanted me to teach. This was 2 days after Trump's genius real estate deal. And I'm sitting there looking at Israeli Palestinians who's so deep a part of their souls is holding onto a Nakba, a tragedy that they've experienced and which defines who they are, of being exiled. And every one of them, by the way, condemns October 7th. They're not like the Gazans and Palestinians in the West Bank. Every one of them. There's no October 7th celebration in Israel. They're loyal citizens of Israel. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking at their faces and I say to them, I apologize to you. I can't imagine what you're experiencing right now. Actually, I can, because it was done to me. The history of my people is a history of being transparentized and stepped on, and people saying you don't belong and move from here and move there and go here and go there. You're my citizens, and as citizens, we're loyal to each other. And how do you feel in the midst living with Israeli Jews? 80% of them are saying, oh, transfer is a good idea. Oh, that's something to consider. I said, I can't imagine how you feel. I apologize to you. And that shared society is not about talking with each other. Shared society is about the ability to see yourself in the place of the other. You are your brother's keeper. Stop. If there is a problem, a Jew is obligated to be a part of the solution. If there's a problem, you are obligated to see it. If there's a problem, you're obligated to put yourself in someone else's shoes. That's when morality starts. So how that gets translated, that's for decent, intelligent people to think about and struggle. And I struggle all the time. What am I supposed to feel and what am I supposed to do? But I don't turn the channel. Principle number 1, our tradition says you are your brother's keeper. Principle number 2 is that your brother and sister are not just Jews. One of the greatest dangers to moral responsibility, especially in times of danger, is how you define the sphere of your moral obligations. Who you're responsible to. Who claims you? Self-interest and nationalism and times of danger shrink. When Hillel says, what's hateful unto you, do not do unto others, who's the other? Now, loyalty to family, loyalty to community, loyalty to nation obligates you to give priority to your people. Yes, charity does begin at home. Yes, loyalty to one's nation and to one's fellow citizens and their well-being comes first. Self-interest is central. But each one of these, self-interest, nationalism, and war when you're being assaulted, shrinks the spheres of responsibility that you're willing to bear. I have to worry about making America great again. I have to make sure about keeping Israel great. I have to worry about my dangers, and we shrink. And our tradition teaches you it's aggravating, and it's hard, and it's unnatural. But every single human being is created in the image of God. Get used to it. Our book, it's mine. Can't I have any nachas and protection in my story? Well, our story starts not with the Jews. We're not the ones created in the image of God. Anyone who sheds another life is going to be guilty because human beings are created in the image of God. In times of danger, there is no lesson more important than the obligation to remember that others includes, yes, people who you hate, people who are your enemy, people who are aggravating you, people who you feel have moral depravity. But the minute they are not endangering your life, at that moment they claim you. The minute they don't have the two key principles that determine whether you're a combatant or not, and that is the principle of having the intent and the principle of having the means. When you have the intent and the means, you are a combatant and I could kill you. But the minute you raise your hand, or the minute that you're a civilian, even if you don't condemn Hamas, so I despise you. I find that you are a moral abomination, but you're a human being. And Israel's IDF code of ethic tells every soldier, you're going to go to war, but you're going to war against humanity, who are human beings and have rights regardless of whether they're Jew or non-Jew, man, woman, Israeli, Palestinian. And that your challenge is, how do you fight for self-defense without losing your humanity? And I could tell you, because I was there, it is almost impossible. But because it's almost impossible, it doesn't mean that that's not our obligation. We are not merely our brother and sister's keepers. We are the keepers of humanity. We are concerned. And we have to do what we can do. And the third and last principle is the principle of moral courage. There is no moral conversation unless you are willing to have moral courage. Morality is not when there is abundance. Your moral fiber is not tested when it's easy. Your moral commitments aren't challenged when you aren't facing any challenges. It's precisely in times of danger that who you are as a Jew and as a moral being have to be tested. And here too, as God turns to Abraham and says, I'm choosing you because you're going to teach your children that to walk in the way of God is to do what is just and right, that same Abraham hears that God is going to destroy the city of Sodom and Gomorrah, and he gets up and he starts screaming at God. Now, God is not the guy you start screaming at. This is a guy who does floods. This is a guy who just zhoops and you're dead. Sends fires to burn Aaron's kids. This is not, toy with the God who could create the world out of speech. And Abraham looks at God and says to God, Chalila lecha, it's an abomination. I'm embarrassed. Who are you? Are you a God of justice? And he stands before God and says, will the judge of all the earth not deal justly? And thus translates all three principles that I expressed. The first, he's their brother's keeper. He takes responsibility for Sodom and Gomorrah. If he feels that injustice is going to happen, he has to be part of the solution. Two, who's Sodom and Gomorrah to Abraham? What is it to him? He could say, okay, God, knock yourself out. What do I care? Sodom and Gomorrah? It's them. But I walk in the way of God by teaching what is just and right. Applies to all human beings. And finally, it's my job to stand up. It's my job to have courage. It's my job not to be coward. It's my job not to turn the channel. Moral courage is difficult, but moral courage is the essence of what it means to be a moral human being. And that means you have to be willing to be alone and to walk alone. And people are going to challenge you. And people are going to say, what's wrong with you? Don't you love the Jews? How could you talk about this right now? This is not the issue. Well, to be a Jew is to walk and to stand up and to say, yes, this is the essence. And I'm willing to be alone. Because Jews, Abraham is called Abraham the Ivri, Abraham the Hebrew. But there was no Hebrew back then. Abraham the Hebrew is not that he spoke Hebrew. The rabbis say it is Abraham Ivri, who lived on the other side of the bank. The world is on one side, and Abraham was willing to walk alone. I don't know how you're supposed to translate each one of these principles. And I don't want to be the judge who determines who's doing it right and who's doing it wrong. And I don't want any of us to be that judge. I want every one of us this Shabbat to reflect on, what does being Jewish mean? What does it demand of me? What does it mean to be a part of a religious tradition that could say, what's hateful unto you, do not do unto others, is the whole Torah, the whole thing. All the rest, shut the shul. Shut all the Jewish organizations. All of it is crap. All of it is irrelevant. If we don't have a core moral decency, who are we? We've walked through the world for thousands of years. We weren't the smartest. We weren't the wealthiest. We weren't the largest. Jews are good people. God, at the end of creation, saw all that God created and said it was very good. And God was wrong. It's not very good. It's our job as good, as Jews, to make it very good. Shabbat Shalom.